Hey you guys, Matt Allen here. Welcome back to Tactical Bassin. Today is a bonus video. You guys know we do videos Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Well, today is an extra one because we're talking about a topic that is not that fun on the front end, but it's super important. Guys, we are talking about boat insurance. We're going to talk about insurance, how to cover your boat, how to cover your tackle, how to cover yourself, because I learned some hard lessons after my crash last year. Tim and I actually have the same insurance guy. He's up here on Clearlake for a Pro-Am, so we are going to go find him right now and ask him some questions because I want to make sure that you guys are covered the way that you think you are. Because I thought I had some coverages that I didn't have. I had some coverages that really helped me out, but there were some issues as well. When this happened, I had a bunch of different policies. Ben, who you're going to meet here in a minute, the only thing I had a policy with him for was my tackle. If it tells you anything, he now covers everything for us. My tackle, my boat, our vehicles, everything, our house, all that stuff. He's very knowledgeable, and I want to pick his brain for you a little bit. I'm not going to tell you where you are and are not covered, what you have, what you don't have, but you guys need to be really careful. You need to make sure that you are asking the right questions of whoever insures you so that if your turn comes up, because we were doing nothing wrong, we were just driving down the road. If your turn comes up, you need to make sure you're going to be taken care of the way you think you are. And I'm telling you, odds are, as a bass fisherman, you're not. So you need to find out the differences. Let's go see if we can find Ben. We'll go from there. All right, guys, let me introduce you to Ben Green. We just met up here on the water. I'm gonna jump on his boat. We'll get situated, and then we'll ask him some questions and sort some of this out. Now, the reason why I wanted to sit down with Ben and talk to him today and pick his brain a little bit for you guys is because, as I already mentioned, Ben only covered one of my policies during the crash last year. He was one of the first calls. Cece called him right away. I still didn't even have reception after I crashed. But that night, once I got to a town, my dad and I got into a hotel room, Ben was texting me at midnight about other policies, things that didn't have anything to do with him, helping me understand, because we were trying to leave Wyoming and we were leaving all my stuff, all my vehicles. He was helping me understand what we could try and pick up, what we should leave behind, all those decisions, because there was no coming back. The fact that he was doing that at midnight on policies that he wasn't covering told me that was somebody I wanted to keep talking to after that. And then it just grew from there. I've learned a ton as I've gone through the highs and lows of dealing with insurance. Ben's answered so many questions for me. So since he's in town, we want to pick your brain a little bit.
Hey everybody, how you doing?
Probably the biggest thing I want to come out right out the gate, I wanted to ask him, I understand with tournaments that there are some misunderstandings about coverage, and I wanted you to explain that right out the gate, because that was very eye-opening for me.
Tournaments involve money, so if there's any compensation on the line, prize money specifically, some insurance companies are not going to take too kindly to that, and they could exclude that loss or find reason to not pay it. Best thing to do to avoid that, get it in writing from your insurance agent or your company. So sometimes an agent can tell you, yeah, don't worry, it's covered, but that's not going to stand up when there's a situation. What's going to stand up is some type of documentation that supports what you are looking for to be covered, that it's covered, and how it's covered, and that's the way to go about that with tournaments.
So the short version of that is, it's very possible that you have coverage, are in a tournament, and your coverage is voided. That may or may not be the case, but there are definitely companies where that can happen, and you need to find out whether or not you are covered. Is
Absolutely,
that right?
Yep.
One of the biggest things for me, I talked to Cece when I found out Ben was here and said, what should I ask him? And one of the biggest things she brought up that hit us the hardest was policy renewals. When policy renewals come out, that's when they hit you with changes and updates. The biggest one for us that was somewhere over the years, my boat trailer was always covered, somewhere over the years on a policy renewal, it just vanished, just gone off of my policy. No one said a word. It just was no longer a line item. Ultimately, it got taken care of 4 months after the crash.
Wow.
It took 4 months for us just to deal with the boat trailer. And it was always on the policy. It was covered, but it took them that long to make the decision to follow through on that. There are little things that make all the differences. Insurance as a whole does not always have your best interest at heart. Why don't you walk us through a regular, a bass boat policy? What is important? What does a guy need to understand to make sure that he's covered in the right places so that if something happens, you don't end up upside down on part of it?
Well, the first part that I want to bring up is talk to somebody that's a fisherman. If somebody knows what a fisherman goes through, all the things that we do with these boats and how important these boats are to us. It's vacation time, it's family commitment. People are out here spending a ton of time and money to make sure that these boats are working. And the only person I think that can identify with that sense of urgency is another fisherman. So I'm going to walk through right quick some of the things you want to look at. And this isn't just a big commercial for me. This is kind of exactly how Tactical Bassin does it. There's a lot of neutrality here. These are tips that you should be able to take to your local insurance agent, your local broker, and be able to put into place, pull out the policy and take a look at it. We're going to start with the trolling motor. Where would the trolling motor be covered? It's going to be covered typically in your hull value. Hull and equipment. Most policies are similarly written, so your first value that you're going to see, it'll say hull and equipment or hull and machinery. And that's everything that's permanently mounted to the hull of the boat. Your outboard, shallow water anchoring systems, graphs, trolling motor, hydro wave. Pretty much that sums it up. Whatever's permanently mounted to that hull, you want to make sure is in that number. The next thing that you want to look at that's specific, and Matt brought this up with his experience, is the trailer. Make sure that you can get the trailer on agreed value as well. And what agreed value means is that's the money that the total amount subject to a loss if that trailer is stolen, if it's damaged beyond repair. Agreed value. Same goes with a hull and machinery. You can get a replacement cost on these things, but typically that's a 2-year. Some companies will offer it up to 5-year depending on the program. And that goes above and beyond what you paid for it, so you can buy a brand new one and that insurance company will back the extra expenses of manufacturing, so on and so forth. But let's get back to it. So the first coverage, hull and machinery. Second coverage is trailer. Can't pound that one home hard enough. We just had a guy, it's an 03 trailer, it pancaked on him, and he got a brand new trailer out of the thing, and he is happy. But anybody else looking at their policy, let's say on a 2015 dual axle trailer, if that thing's $1,500 or $2,000, you're out there, you're looking for a trailer that's going to fit that. Who's selling a trailer for $1,500 or $2,000? That trailer's got more damage than the trailer you had before, or even the trailer that you had that got wrecked.
Right.
So you don't want to have any of that nonsense, because not just the fact of having the trailer, but also the safety for yourself, your family, and to the general public when you're driving down the road. Very important. Next coverage I want to talk about is unattached equipment. And unattached equipment is basically anything that's not attached to the boat that's not fishing gear. Your camera, your tripod, fire extinguishers if it's not bolted down, auxiliary stereos, oars, life jackets, those types of items, unattached equipment. Following that same line, most important one that we all need to talk about is fishing gear. I am the only person, when it comes down to it, that you got to be honest with, other than yourself, about how much money you spend on fishing gear, because I need to know that. We absolutely need to know that, as your insurance people need to know what is in the boat underneath the rod lockers. Couple misconceptions, we'll hit those real quick. Typical policy is not going to cover unless there's visible signs of forced entry. So under your rod lockers, all of a sudden rods are disappearing, turn in a claim, they say, hey, it's not covered because there's no visible signs of forced entry. So make sure you're locking things up at night.
So they have to be broken open.
It's got to be broken open. There's got to be some signs of forced entry to get that claim to roll forward a lot smoother. Now they will make exceptions. I have been able to get some of those exceptions made, but that day's pretty much come and gone on how to get those exceptions made.
Can I cut you right there? When he says exceptions, the right insurance person makes all the difference.
Absolutely.
That's why we're talking. I told you guys already that I moved all of our policies over to Ben, and I'm not here to tell you that you should do the same thing. I'm here to grill Ben because you guys need some of this information. But I will tell you that we had policies where things were covered and we got hung out to dry anyway, and nobody would fight for us. And we had proper coverage. It was line items on the policy. Nobody would fight for us. And then I had a commercial policy with Ben with all my tackle and all that stuff because of tactical. And he went to bat for us right away. In fact, it was the last claim we put in. It was 3 weeks after the accident that we actually got around to submitting it all. We told you right away. We waited 3 weeks to actually do the paperwork, and it was the first one to pay out.
And what was unique about that claim, to kind of talk about the service aspect of it, is I took the video, I wrote about a 2-paragraph description of what occurred. I submitted the claim on Matt's behalf. I called Matt, I think we had a conversation about 7:45 or 8 in the morning that particular day. I called him at 1 p.m. to follow up, and he said,
it was done. I'd already talked to the lady. We'd made the adjustments. It was done. They were cutting a check.
Blew my mind because it usually doesn't work that fast. That was incredible.
That was awesome.
But it's all clear communication. Here's what happens. If you're an insurance person that works in the insurance and claims, in the claims department, all day long you're getting piles of paper. You're getting piles of paper. You're getting complaints. People are not happy when they have claims. So understanding that mentality, if you can kind of figure out what they're going to look for so that they can justify what they need to spend and to make you happy, but also keep that cost in line for the insurance company, that's 90% of the battle right there.
Yeah. So sorry that I cut you off. You were talking about exceptions and that those were going away, but that stood out to me because
Right.
it really does make a difference having somebody that will go to bat for you. That's how exceptions are made.
Right. And we don't want to do that too often, and that starts with the clear communication from up front,
Right.
from the customer to us, from us to the customer, and then ultimately to the insurance company as well.
Right.
Everything should be above board. A lot of guys that don't really want to disclose certain things, top speed on your boat application, that's not a way really to do things. And the reason is because there shouldn't be a gray area when there doesn't have to be.
Right. That's something that I told you that once, that I have friends who got policies with giant major companies and carriers from out of their area and people that had nothing to do with fishing, hoping and praying that there would be enough gray that if there was a problem, nobody would understand and they would just get paid out. And that is insane. You want no gray areas. You want to document all of your stuff. You want serial numbers. You want it all cataloged, and you want somebody like Ben to have that information,
Right.
so that when you have a problem, you know exactly what's coming.
Absolutely. And so continuing on with what we were talking about, we got rods, reels, and tackle. Typically the policies that we see that are above average are going to cover the rod to $1,000, the reel to $1,000. That's a $2,000 combo. That is a relatively high-end type of an insurance policy. And high-end sometimes means expensive. We're not the lowest cost provider on the block, and nor should you buy with the lowest cost provider on the block, because that ability, that professionalism to be able to explain your situation to the insurance company when you need it, that's what you're paying for in addition to the coverage.
Right.
All right, so we're going to start now with the outboard. That's the biggest thing. You're running down the lake, you hit something, boom, lower unit's gone. What is that? That's a collision. So typically, and again, you've got to look at your insurance policy. Typically, they will pick that up. An insurance company will pay that for the collision, and it would be minus your deductible. And if you're in a depreciation policy, which is some of the older boats, they're going to depreciate that value. What's depreciation mean? So depreciation in an insurance policy is basically to leverage out the age of the unit. If a 2019 or a current year boat has a value of $10,000 for that lower unit, including the propeller, but you have a 1979, there's going to be some depreciation in there. So it's a hidden deductible. Again, doesn't need to be a hidden deductible with that clear communication, and that's one of the things a lot of guys get hit with, and they're like, hey, I have a $5,000 lower unit, but the entire boat's only insured for $7,000 or $8,000, so they're not going to just go and buy you a brand new motor or a brand new lower unit.
Right.
Now that's typical. Most of the companies do cover the collision. Only 1 or 2 companies that I know of are going to cover the power head when no collision has happened. It's something unique, and it is pretty hard to qualify for. So a lot of service records, they go in depth, and we do have that, and a lot of brokers in the nation do have that. Maybe your local broker's one of them.
Okay. Now, one of my biggest takeaways from our actual crash was liability as it relates to injury, or who's paying for injury, essentially. My dad and I were both injured in our crash. As it turns out, on my policy, my uninsured or underinsured motorist coverage was not where it should have been. And that I've called every one of my friends and made them at least look at it, if not change it on their policy, and understand what it is. Because on my policy, that broker did not explain that to me. I didn't understand really what it was or what it was for. And the same amount of injury happens whether it pays out a little or pays out a lot, right? We got hurt either way. And understanding how that works and how that could benefit you in the event that you really are hurt is probably, after the crash, my biggest takeaway. I mean, I really have hounded all my friends to understand it and to change it on their policies. Can you explain what it's for, what it is,
Absolutely.
and how it applies to boating, how it applies to auto? Because we changed it all over the place.
So a lot of misconceptions on there, whether it's auto insurance or anything else that's liability for vehicles, is people say they have full coverage. Well, that's fine because it doesn't exist. There's a liability limit, and that's what Matt's kind of talking about here. So the first part of that liability limit, if you take out your policy, it'll say each person per accident, each accident, and then property damage. 3 components, and that could vary from state to state. I don't know that it does, but for that, each person, each accident, and property damage, that number is the maximum that insurance company is going to pay out. So typically in a liability situation, you might have 100,000, 300,000, so 100,000 each person, 300,000 each accident, and $50,000 for property damage. If that's the case, your uninsured motorist, you want to make sure that limit is parallel. 100,000 each person, $300,000 each accident, $50,000 for property damage. So I don't sell those limits. I sell higher than those limits. I want to put a disclaimer, but that's typically what the nation has. That's typically what we find across the nation. So 100, 300, 50. Now, if you look at the uninsured motorist, what that does is that's going to cover you if somebody has insurance or they don't have enough insurance. It's going to cover for some of your medical payments. It's going to cover for some of your rehabilitation if possible. For example, you can't do the job that you did prior to the accident. You have to go and get retrained on a new career. That's what that's for. It's extremely important. It's another part where people will try to do that to lower it to save money, but in your case, it would actually cost you more money, and it has been a bad experience.
Right. Yeah, understanding or checking your policy and seeing where that underinsured coverage is and adjusting that, moving it up, in the event that you're in a severe accident will make all the difference for you going forward. And that was not something we understood prior. That was one of my biggest takeaways. And we started talking auto. You guys do auto and everything else also. Like I said, we moved everything over from the home to all of it.
I'm gonna take that and hit a real popular topic that I see a lot of guys. I said property damage, $50,000, and I said that our office doesn't sell that. The minimum we sell is $100,000, which is still substantially light. Now, what does that mean? That means if you're driving at a tournament, let's say, or you're driving just down the road and you run into somebody and your vehicle your activity causes $100,000 worth of property damage. That's the maximum that insurance company is going to pay out on your behalf, which is that's a pretty okay limit typically. However, if you have anything less than that, realize when you're at a tournament or we're just going to say a tournament because we insure fishermen. If you're in that situation and you hit a boat and a truck, well, brand new bass boats now are $80,000. Brand new diesel trucks that guys are buying, $70,000. You're going to be held responsible for the remainder over and above whatever that property damage limit is. And they will put a court-ordered judgment on you. And that typically leads to bankruptcy. I'm going to tell a real quick story, One of my customers called me. He was with a carrier, had a 25-year relationship with the carrier, sent over his declaration pages. The guy's retiring. He's retiring. He's not going to have the time in life to be able to go out there and rebuild his wealth. $25,000 property damage limit. As soon as I let them know that, they called me back instantly, raised that to $250,000 on the auto, and then added an umbrella for $1 million. $1.25 million. Because one accident could have wiped out that man's financial history.
Sink him.
Yep. 9 grandkids.
That's the stuff people don't understand. I mean, and I was one of them. You just don't think about insurance. You get insurance. It's a legal responsibility, and you sort of walk away from it until you or someone you know has been through it. It makes all the difference in the world taking a half hour out of your life and getting these coverages right so that if your turn comes up, it doesn't change the rest of your life. That's the difference. And it's that big of a deal. I mean, it truly changes the rest of people's lives. Bankrupts people, or you don't have the money you need to start a new career. I mean, there's so many bad things that can take place so quickly versus just getting your coverages right, and a bad situation happens, you survive, you move on, and life is fine.
And a lot of folks out there that are running sponsored trucks or wraps, one of the things that is a very cautionary area is that if you have any type of a financial arrangement with a sponsor where you're getting dollars or you're getting product, and you have their picture on your outside of your vehicle, that's a commercial use vehicle. You're using that for business use. If you have a personal policy, it might not cover you if you get into an accident. You want to clarify that. But the secondary part of this is, if you have an advertiser on the outside of your vehicle and you get in an accident, they could be called in to defend the liability. And if they get called in to defend the liability, now they're a third party to this gigantic claim that could be happening. What we want to do is make sure that if you're in that position, you get a commercial policy and you name them as additional insured on the policy and provide them a certificate. 2 things happen. 1, they're protected, you're protected, and that's the way to go. We want to make sure everybody out there, it's hard to get sponsors these days.
So if I understand that right, I'm going to say that back to you. I want to make sure I understand that. So you're saying that a guy gets a discount deal on product, or gets worms and logos up his truck, because a lot of bass fishermen do that, and he gets in an accident, they could argue potentially that it's commercial use and not cover him, and additionally sue the company that he logoed up with.
Absolutely, especially if he's headed for a competition where there's money involved.
Okay. That's important. These are the things that, as bass fishermen, we don't really understand, and we need somebody to walk us through that. Is there anything else really important you want to hit on?
I kind of want to talk about your tackle policy, the reason that we got together in the first place. So Matt's got a kind of a unique tackle policy because obviously with everything that he does, he has everything under the sun. I have like 1/10 of his collection from watching these videos, but pretty much everything that's in this boat came from TacticalBassin. So anyway, Matt's got a unique situation, and with that, we wanted to cover all of his gear. We wanted to write a special policy, and that's what's called an inland marine floater. So anywhere that he goes in the world, his coverage extends. So his cameras, rods and reels and tackle, he's on a plane over here, he's on a boat. Anywhere in the world, that's going to be covered for fire, theft, vandalism. Mm-hmm. It's a unique situation. When there was the accident, a lot of his stuff was damaged that he was using in transit so that he could go on, basically go on and tour the country. And that's what that policy was designed for, and it responded exactly the way that it was designed.
It did. That was incredible. You know, at the time we did it, it seemed like overkill, but we did it anyway just to be sure, just to make sure that we were covered. And that policy stepped up and made such a big difference. We had so many problems elsewhere. I mean, it really helped us pull through because it took so long for things to pay out. We ended up in a pretty serious bind. But the fact that policy came through so quickly helped us carry ourselves until we could get back to normal life. that made a huge difference.
Biggest thing that I can say in insurance, I've been in it 20 years, the relationship you have with your agent, whether you like him or not, that's fine and dandy. The communication, having it in writing, having that trust, knowing that policy change is going to be done when it's supposed to be done, adding that driver, taking that driver off. Gigantic.
Right.
Gigantic.
Right. Yeah, there should not be any gray at the end of the day. You need to know exactly where you stand, have it written out, have somebody you trust is going to fight for you, and that will make all the difference when your card comes up. Guys, we appreciate you. Ben, I appreciate you.
Thanks, Matt.
Hopefully you get out there and stick them the next few days. Sorry we wasted some of your pre-fish time
It's
out
all
here,
good.
but I really appreciate you stopping and talking to me, talking to the Tactical Bassin family. You are part of the Tactical Bassin family. We appreciate you. Guys, thank you for coming along. Hopefully this information helps you. For some of you, if you listen to it and make changes down the road, it is going to change your life. It's that important. We appreciate you though. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk to you soon.